With me is Charlie Veitch of the Love Police. Charlie, welcome to Going Underground. You're in trouble with the police, or at least you have been. What is reasonable force? Because it's been applied to you. Only reasonable force.
Well, reasonable force is a very open and vague concept which the police can use to prevent themselves being sued either through a criminal or a civil case. So when they get an activist, for example, a guy called Archie during the student riots, he very violently headbutted the police truncheon about 5 times, and because it was his head attacking the police truncheon, which gave him a kind of concussion.
Damaging taxpayers' money, property.
Yeah, so basically the police, by holding their truncheon peacefully and him headbutting it, they used reasonable force there.
They sent him away for a while?
He had to go for brain surgery that very night to save his life because he had bleeding on the brain. So it's reasonable.
How did you see the media coverage of that at the time? Because that's certainly the first time one saw that case. The right-wing press were pretty quick, I would assume, to say,
well, yeah, the
police are right.
As we saw with the London and Manchester riots, the one after the Mark Duggan shooting, and also the student riots, the establishment press, Daily Telegraph, Daily Mail, Daily Express, the BBC, obviously conveyed a picture that these were drunken, stupid, criminal yobbos wanting to cause wanton, nihilistic destruction.
But the corporate media quick to paint that case and other cases as the police trying their best to control the mob.
Well, what happens, Afshin, those with a monopoly on violence and on force, as in the state, the military, the police, will always denounce the small peasant who thinks that maybe I can also use force, or I can show my displeasure by attacking a police van or a government building, as we saw during the student riots. And so you need a perspective that is outside the establishment to sometimes tell the truth about what's happening, because when we, the West, not we, but the West will support these hyper-Islamist terrorists in Syria attacking the government, and they're freedom fighters and rebels. But when you get many levels of less intensity of a student who is very upset that his Lib Dem leader, Nick Clegg, said no tuition fees, and all of a sudden he has to pay £9,000 per year, £30,000 over a degree, and he goes and smashes up a bus stop, which isn't like bombing a Syrian government building, but they get painted as the most nasty, low life. There's a whiff of eugenics about the kind of press saying that the poor are responsible for their own poverty. It's a very clever way to kind of keep the establishment established and keep smashing down the poor.
But what about this police viciousness? I mean, I remember Jean Genet talking about the '68 Vietnam demos and saying there's something curious here because the police ranks are from the poor and they're the ones beating these people up.
Some very clever Roman, who I can't remember his name, said you can always pay half the poor to kill the other half because they want money. There's the unenlightened poor. Police viciousness, one of my big issues that I've been telling many people like
You've
yourself.
been hit, personally.
I've been hit personally. I've been truncheoned.
And handcuffed pretty badly.
Handcuffed very tightly. The police, God bless their little angry souls, have to deal with drug addicts and junkies and rapists and murderers. So then those people are dirty, but when they go to a protest when there's a bunch of, dreadlocked, clean, middle-class kids with a social conscience, they can release all their anger and hatred and start smashing up these people who their only crime is for speaking out against what they see as wrong.
And so, and that's being used very effectively in the times of austerity, presumably. And we'll see more of that?
Well, we saw it in the 80s, didn't we, with the miners and how the police, quite happily, they might be in the same boat, they might come from the same kind of socioeconomic background, but they'll happily smash up because the police are very well indoctrinated. They wear the big Queen's crown, they have to swear allegiance, they have to swear an oath to the Queen. So their job is to earn their £30,000 a year and a fantastic pension to maintain order and to uphold the Queen. They're paid to not think. Their salary depends on them not being able to see the bigger picture.
Albeit that we have seen plebgate and some kind of rumblings against the government.
Yeah.
And the Tories, I don't think Cameron's people are that fond of the Metropolitan Police at the moment.
Again,
or is it you're saying they just protect the Queen and Prince Charles?
Well, there's the establishment, which might contain the Conservatives and the Labour, but then there's the permanent establishment, which is very old money, the Windsors, the Duke of Lancaster, the Duke of Westminster, the Dukes, the ladies. That's the real establishment which the police work for. They don't swear allegiance to the government of the day, they swear allegiance to the Queen.
How do you see regulation working when we hear of more cases of Mark Duggan and others?
Well, anyone who's come up against paperwork,
not that we're prejudging the Mark Duggan one, that's ongoing.
Oh yeah,
the one that
we can't comment
the riots.
because it's an ongoing thing, of course. But The IPCC is made up mostly of ex-policemen, and we all know that institutionalization can get people into a culture. The word cult comes from culture. There is a police culture, and they'll always look after their own. And when you've been indoctrinated in the system for 25 years as a policeman, and then suddenly you're meant to snitch and rat on your fellow cops, you're not going to do that good a job. They will twist it as much as they will go within the book of the law to kind of say that everything's
Well, you
reasonable.
say we all know, but the Supreme Court presumably sees through that, thinks it's okay. The Attorney General, whole levels of parts of British government would say they don't know that, and the IPCC, you know, is a good institution.
I'm glad you raised that. I think people in Britain get very distracted by the infighting at the kind of middle echelons of political power. Labour versus Conservative, the courts, you know, changing this ruling, or appeals here, the police complaints. Whereas in fact, you can tell who's in charge by who you're not allowed to criticize. I want to see some mainstream outlets criticizing the Queen, criticizing Prince Philip, criticizing the Nazi connections in the past, and criticizing the fact that we send young...
I'll never get my knighthood now.
No, I know, sorry.
Anyway,
and we send... My favorite
Nazi
irony,
connections in the past.
That's in the
That's
that
like the Daily
happens.
Mail thing. You're being as bad as the Mail was to Miliband.
Exactly. Like I wear a Hugo Boss watch. Who cares that he designed the SS uniform?
I mean, much more seriously, deaths in custody. These statistics. No prosecution of one police officer.
Within the rule of law, when they do a kind of an inquiry into a death in custody, there's always footage of some terrified prisoner who's innocent until proven guilty. So he's still an innocent man. It's mostly men that get killed. And he might be kicking off, understandably, because he's been held in captivity and he's an innocent man. And so for kicking off and complaining, the police will strangle him or like put their knees on his neck. And because he might then still be struggling, saying, get off me, they can then say it's reasonable force. You know, these are like government sanctioned restraining techniques.
Charlie Veitch, thank you for going underground.
Thank you, Afshin.